Imagine endless herds of wild cattle stretching to the horizon, 3 million strong. Imagine dust clouds that blot out the sun, rivers that swallow wagons whole, and nights where the only sound is the moan of a restless herd. Between the 1860s and 1880s, Texas cowboys faced all of this and more on the great cattle drives. And at the heart of it all was one trail, the Chisholm Trail, a highway of hoofbeats that carved Texas into legend. By 1865, Texas was broke. Confederate veterans came home to ruined farms and worthless money, but the land itself held a secret wealth, longhorn cattle. Millions roamed the prairies untended, descendants of Spanish herds left centuries earlier. They were tough, with horns that stretched 6 feet across, bred by nature to survive on thorns and dust. In Texas, one was worth $5. In Chicago, where meatpackers craved beef, the same steer sold for 40. The challenge was distance. The railroads didn't yet reach Texas. To turn cattle into cash, someone had to drive them north, hundreds of miles, through rivers, storms, and hostile plains. That meant only one thing, the rise of the cowboy. The cowboy wasn't born in Hollywood. He was a mix of cultures, vaqueros from Mexico, African-American freedmen, tough Anglo frontiersmen, and native guides. They carried Spanish saddles, Mexican lariats, and Colt revolvers. They worked for a few dollars a day, riding Mustangs that bucked like demons. Their job wasn't glamorous. It was dirty, dangerous, and exhausting. But in doing it, they created the image that would come to define Texas itself. The most famous of the cattle roads was the Chisholm Trail, stretching nearly 1,000 miles from central Texas to Kansas railheads like Abilene, Wichita, and Dodge City. It was named after Jesse Chisholm, a trader of Cherokee and Scottish descent, who had built part of the route for hauling goods. Cowboys turned it into a highway of cattle. Every spring, roundups began. Men fanned out across the open range, roping wild longhorns and branding them with iron. The air filled with the smell of burnt hair and dust. Slowly, herds of thousands formed, living rivers of horns and hooves moving north. The trail was unforgiving. Stampedes were the cowboys' terror. At night, a sudden clap of thunder or the hiss of a rattlesnake could send thousands of cattle surging in blind panic. Hooves thundered like an earthquake. Cowboys leapt into the saddle half asleep, riding dangerously close to the herd, trying to wheel them into a circle before dawn. Men died under those hooves, trampled before their shouts were even heard. Rivers claimed just as many. The Brazos, the Red, the Arkansas. Swollen with rain, they became death traps. Cattle plunged into the current, horns locking, bodies swept away. Cowboys dove in after them, risking drowning for a herd that wasn't even theirs. And then came the human threat, rustlers and raids. Armed bands shadowed the trail, waiting to cut cattle from the herd. Some cowboys told of riding with revolvers drawn for days, knowing ambush could come at any bend in the trail. When the herd wasn't stampeding or drowning, life on the trail was bone-wearying routine. Cowboys rode from dawn to dusk in choking dust, their faces sunburned, lips cracked. Nights were spent circling the herd, humming or singing old songs to calm the restless cattle, tunes like Red River Valley and Streets of Laredo. Meals came from the chuck wagon, beans, bacon, biscuits, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Fresh meat was rare. Water was worse. Showers were non-existent. By the time they reached Kansas, most cowboys hadn't bathed in months. But there was camaraderie. Around the campfire, men swapped stories, told tall tales, and played cards by lantern light. The cowboys' loneliness was eased only by these moments of rough laughter and song. After months on the trail, reaching Kansas felt like salvation. Towns like Abilene, Wichita, and Dodge City became legendary. Cattle towns where the trail ended and temptation began. Cowboys rode in dusty, ragged pockets jingling with months of pay. Saloons lined the streets, gambling tables clattered. Dance halls opened their doors. Trouble wasn't far behind. Lawmen like Wild Bill Hickok and Bat Masterson earned their reputations trying to control these towns when the cattle herds rolled in. Drunken fights, shootings, and theft were common. But for a few nights, the cowboy lived like a king before riding south again. Not every cowboy stayed poor. Some became cattle barons, men who turned open range into empires. Ranches like the King Ranch grew to sizes larger than small countries. Families like the Wagoners and Goodnights became legends in their own right. But their success was built on the sweat of countless nameless cowboys, men who never saw their names in history books but left hoofprints across the prairie. By the 1880s, the world of open-range cattle drives began to die. Barbed wire fenced off the land, ending the freedom of long drives. Railroads pushed deep into Texas, bringing markets closer. The great herds dwindled and the cowboy's way of life shifted. The Chisholm Trail fell silent. The dust settled. But the legend only grew louder. Hollywood would later turn the cowboy into a gunslinger. Polished boots, white hats and black hats, shootouts at high noon. But the truth was harsher and harder. The cowboy wasn't looking for glory. He was chasing wages, survival, and a little pride. Yet his grit, his songs, and his endless miles in the saddle forged the myth of the West. Even today, rodeos echo the skills of the trail: roping, riding, branding. Country songs carry the same loneliness and pride. And in every Texas heart, the cowboy still rides, symbol of freedom, toughness, and a land that once echoed with 3 million hoofbeats. The cattle drives lasted barely 20 years, but in that short time, they carved Texas into legend. The dust, the danger, the rivers, and the nights under the stars, all of it became part of the Texas soul.